Hello humans, hello humans. It's about 45 minutes later. Shut this off. It's too bad it's warm. It's been pretty cold here. It's actually easier to take the cold when we don't have, or when it's dry, when the air is dry, which we get around here with cold. The air just gets really, really dry. Then all of a sudden the temperature rises from, the mid-teens and 20s up into the 30s and 40s, but we get the increase in the moisture, and then everybody gets cold because of the moisture in the air. Usually we're in the upper 80s into the 90s in terms of moisture content. Anyway, so I'm going to keep on with the hyper novelty theme for some time as we get into this, right? Because there's so many weird ramifications of it. Boy, pelicans flying overhead. Interesting. They're bigger than eagles, actually. Anyway, so as part of hyper novelty, we come unhinged. We become these, there could be a lot of untethered heathers running around, freaking out, that kind of thing. But also it's going to extend to larger groups, to aggregated groups within our social order. So I expect, as part of hyper novelty, to see the emergence of corporations that are near to nation states or more powerful than nation states. So let us hypothesize that indeed it is factual that Lockheed Martin has an alien reproduction vehicle assembly line that is producing tic-tac UFO kind of things, or UFOs, what we're going to call UFOs. It's producing these. They're human-made, and they're being used by Lockheed Martin. But they're simply not being given to the government. The government isn't being told shit. Once these people get hold of this technology, they say, fuck you, government, we're more powerful than you, and you guys cannot be trusted. So that cannot be trusted part's really going to be playing into it here in hyper novelty. And you will not believe the ramifications that I'm expecting to appear as a result of this you guys can't be trusted hitting the top down, right? It's going to be, so in my opinion, as we go through this over these next few years, the United States is going to recognize itself in a new state of being that is not federal control, but is much more akin to the early days of the Republic, with very, very, very little government control at all, and a lot of corporations just going off and doing their own shit. So let's hypothesize that Lockheed Martin has some of these, and they're not alone. There are other corporations that have these vehicles, different kinds of them. So there's at least two different kinds of technology involved with alien reproduction vehicles that corporations have. And then we have to ask ourselves, if you were a corporation and you had UFOs, would it be in your interest to go and colonize or explore as a corporation? Fuck the government. No government involved. So it would be Lockheed Martin's lunar base, right? That kind of thing. Or Raytheon, right? These kind of things, right? I actually happen to have a relationship way in the past with Raytheon at a couple of different levels, as did my father, because he was testing Raytheon gear in Vietnam for the Department of Defense as part of his being the military governor of the Highlands in Vietnam War for the Americans, right? This in the latter stages of the war. The Vietnamese government had broken down, and we get to a situation here where U.S. government was actually running the government in Vietnam because of the dysfunction of the corrupt government there that was basically the cause for everybody wanting to go communistic. It was planned, it was designed, it's a mother wepper kind of thing. But nonetheless, that was the the stated reason was the government was so corrupt that, you know, they went communist just to get rid of all the corruption, which is what they're trying to do in the United States. They're trying to say everything's so corrupt, you're going to have to become a communist thing to get rid of all of the corrupt DAs that George Soros put in. So there's 3,000 plus counties in the United States. It is estimated that George Soros has put in over 2,000 district attorneys, and has put in an additional 4,000 people into the justice system in terms of, you know, locally appointed judges, etc. So they actually owe their allegiance to George Soros. They don't work for the United States government at all. They don't work for you guys. They work for George Soros. Anyway, so this is going to come out in hypernovelty. And so we may well have a situation now where the activity that I'm seeing on the moon, okay, that I can accurately tell you why I suspect that I'm looking at a battle. Okay, so I can say this item, that item, this action, this movement, all of these things reflect an organized strategy, and a directed strategic violence ongoing on the lunar surface. So it's not a war, because wars are settled by banksters and through negotiation from one bank to another, and they have accomplished their goals of putting in what population they want where they want. So it's not that kind of a thing, right? But it's a contention. So we'll call it a war for lack of a better term, but these are wars of conquest, I think, that I'm watching. That someone is attempting to kick off the motherfuckers that are on the moon, or to take over a big chunk of the moon in preparation for kicking off the motherfuckers that are on it, or in it, or both. In any event, though, so we're seeing the contention and all of that, and now I have to wonder, you know, they say, you know, like a secret space program and all of that, as though the government is in charge. It's like, hey guys, that is not necessarily the case. You may have Area 51 and S4 and all of that, and these guys may have their secret space program and that kind of shit, but hey, people, the corporations are off on their own. It is only because you were born before the years of hypernovelty that you automatically assume that a secret space program, a breakaway civilization, is organized as, you know, government, pyramidical, etc. It may well simply be corporate divisions. So we may have, you know, and if that's the case, let's assume that indeed some of what I'm saying is accurate, and we have organizations like, you know, Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and some of these other places up there fighting someone on the moon, okay, fighting something on the moon. They're doing it for their own purposes, the corporations are, and for their own goals, but they may also be contending with each other. Just because Lockheed Martin kicks the people off the moon doesn't mean they're going to welcome Raytheon in their new territory. So it's going to be a very much more complex world, guys. It's not going to be easily delineated and structured in a pyramidical fashion. That's all going away. That is an artifact of the thousands of years of abuse by the Elohim, who had that structure, okay, and they imposed that structure on all of humanity. And humanity normally does not operate that way. Usually, humanity prefers to organize itself as collectives of tribes. And, you know, this was always the big problem for the royals in Scotland and so on, is that you had to argue with all the fucking tribes to get them to get out there and go to war with you. You know, come and help you fight somebody, right? Which is the way it should be. You should not be able to give an order and have. You should really have to work your ass off to argue them into a position that they want to take that risk. I've got another stop coming up, and I'm trying to chug down some vitamins here as I go along. It's been a weird morning. Anyway, so So we may have Lockheed duking it out with Raytheon, also fighting the Elohim, and also fighting the ring makers of Saturn, for all I know. Anybody that tells you they know is so full of shit that you need to just ignore them, right? This is like Carrie Cassidy or Gene Decode talking about AI, all right? That as soon as Gene Decode starts talking about AI, he's off in fantasy land. This guy has no technical grasp. I doubt he was a technician in the Navy. I actually doubt that he served, to be honest. His language doesn't reflect that. He sounds like a fucktard and a liar, to be honest. You know, somebody caught in fantasy land. These other people believe him. You know, this, what was he? Patriot something. One of these podcasters had Gene Decode and Carrie Cassidy on the other day, and it's like, oh my God, and they're both discussing AI. And Carrie Cassidy lives entirely in a fantasy land relative to AI and anything technical, right? She just assumes that if she's seen it in the movies, that's valid because the movies are predictive programming and they wouldn't tell you about it unless they actually could do it. So it's like, okay, you know, this is not an adult way to go through life. And so her interview the other day with Jay Weidner, which is really a good interview from the perspective of hearing Jay Weidner talk about this. But in there, you see her exact mental situation because she cannot believe that Jay Weidner came to this conclusion on his own, and she assumes that he must have been told by some whistleblower or someone with authority. So see, there is what you're going to run into. Carrie Cassidy is a prime example. She's like the woo version of our untethered Heather Heying, Brett Weinstein's wife. Carrie Cassidy loves authority. Loves it, just loves it, loves it, loves it. She can't live without that authority, and hypernovelty is just going to kick her in the ass. Because first off, I don't believe any of her whistleblowers, right? I do not accept, she gives these whistleblowers authority. Human life is cheap to the people at the top here. But anyway, so Carrie Cassidy is super enamored of authority. She has the authority of whistleblowers for everything she says. And so thus she can say all this horse shit, and she just assumes it's true because a whistleblower told her, and he wouldn't tell her, he would not deliberately lie because he has the authority of having lived through it, done it, or whatever the fuck, right? And it's just like Jay Weidner was telling her, you know, people lie, that he worked with Corey Good, the butthead, who lied day after day after day after day on their Gaia TV shows to everybody's face. For years he lied. And then the fucker sued me for for stating my opinion that he was lying. And so he sues me. I win the lawsuit. Which I'm kind of proud of because of the way I did it strategically. But anyway, and then he had to admit, Corey Good had to admit under oath in deposition that it was all lies. And so if Gene Decode has to be put under deposition because he gets sued, is he going to admit that all his bullshit is lies? Now, Carrie Cassidy, she's not lying. She's reporting to you what some whistleblower told her, what some person that she has granted authority to have this opinion and to be the backstop for her opinion is saying that XYZ is factual. So she can, you know, robustly say this is factual, when in fact it's horseshit. All of this stuff about AI is not technically possible. So Gene Decode says that AI sweeps the internet 300 to 500 times a day. It reads every fucking thing in the internet. He's so lame. I mean, it hurts my head to hear shit like that. There's so many different reasons that is not feasible at all. And then he goes on to give attributes to AI of having willpower and having desire. No AI has desire. They don't want to do anything. There's no there. So Carrie Cassidy judges AI by herself. You know, she wants this and so on. So she thinks AI is sentient as she is. and that's debatable as to whether or not she's actually sentient at any given point. Um, but that's what she does. She attributes all of these things to AI. She personifies it. And that's not the case. But Gene Decode does that too. And these people are saying, this one guy, this Patriot podcaster, whatever the fuck his name was saying that these were the two people that really knew AI. Well, they're the two people that are throwing out all kinds of fantasies, but they don't have a fucking clue about AI. And they're gonna, so in my way of thinking, hyper-novelty is gonna be really bad on both of these guys because nobody's going to be accepting authority anymore. And, if Kerry Cassidy brings up Captain Mark Richards, I'm gonna say he's a liar. We can just dismiss what he says. He's a liar. And so she was in a real world of hurt with this interview with Jay Weidner, which is fascinating to watch, the psychology of her, as well as the Jay describing how he came to this understanding about JFK, which I think is brilliant and is quite factual, right? In any event, though, but Kerry kept going back to this quote whistleblower. She kept going back to her authority about all of this, and Jay had to keep reminding her, he's lying, he's not telling you the truth. He was not there. It didn't happen that way. There was nothing for any of these people to be in on, right? So it was not a giant conspiracy. And everybody telling her that exactly it was a giant conspiracy is 100% wrong. It was a conspiracy, but not the way we think, right? That's why you should go and watch Jay Weidner's documentary, which is pretty cool. I put it on 2 times speed because I just don't have that much time, and I whipped right through it. But you really should do that. You should go and watch it. Anyway, so we're going to have the situation where even, and is probably especially in the woo-woo world, for those people that have this hidden authority bias, all of Kerry Cassidy's 100% of her 18 years, or whatever it is, 20 years, 21 years, whatever the hell, but 100% of all of her work is simply throwing authority onto people and accepting whatever bullshit that they put out, and then she regurgitates it. That is her modus operandi. That's what's actually happening in her videos, year after year after year. So she won't have the luxury of being able to regurgitate stuff relative to a supposed backstop of authority as we move into hyper-novelty. And it's going to really, really impact her because people just, set up and say, no, your Mark Richards is not a captain. He's not in the space program. His dad was not in the space program. He's lying to you because he got nothing better to do and he's just sitting in prison. So he makes up all these interesting stories and he gets a real thrill when he gets online and sees you say his name in these interviews and put authority on him. He gets a big rush out of it. It's all a psychological thing for him. I used to work corrections. I worked around these people. Kerry probably could have worked corrections as I had and still would have this attitude that anybody saying this shit and claiming to be a whistleblower has an authority. There was one person in all of her interviews that actually was legit, talked to her. Every other person that she's ever talked to is full of shit to some major degree. And so this is the situation we're at the moment, is that we're moving into hyper-novelty and she's going to have to face that. The same way that Heather is going to have to face that she has no authority. She's got no underpinning, that none of the studies that she relies on, all of the journals that she relies on have to be thrown away or examined to the minutia in the particulars of that moment to see if it was actually valid. You can't accept them as saying, they did a good study and wrote up this good report of this study here, XYZ, right, study, and therefore I will trust them on the QRS study. You can't do that because the authority doesn't transfer that way anymore. And so we don't have that world. That being the case, it's going to be really tough on these people, both Kerry and Heather. And they're both going to be untethered. It's going to be, like I say, it's going to be really rough on Kerry Cassidy. because every single one of our whistleblowers is going to be disputed. And then even then, there will be no government. There will be no authority that we will grant that authority to as we go forward. Now, obviously, this is a particulate kind of an event. Okay, it's not really an event. It's happening now. The hypernovelty. They're getting into the issues here of what we're all going to face, and that's the way of our world here as we go forward. Is this cracking open the coconut to see what's really in the damn thing, right? We want to know what's really in there. And so, hang on a second, I'll stop here. So these next few months, as we get into the hypernovelty more and more, could be really hard on lots of these people. I expect that we'll have some level of mental breakdowns that'll be visible in videos and stuff, not just in the normies getting stuck walking across the sidewalk, that kind of, across the crosswalk, that kind of thing, right? It's going to be much more widespread and much deeper. And it'll really hit, like I say, it's really going to hit the woo people. So many of whom are like Carrie, and they have an inbuilt bias favoring normalcy, normality, and authority. Anyway, so I got to go. I got to pick up some more stuff here, and then 2 more quick stops, and I'm home to do work. So anyway, I'll put these up in a while. But hypernovelty is going to bite our ass, people. Talk to you later.